Hi, this is Brad Linder with Liliputing, and this is the GPD Duo, which may be one of the weirdest laptops that I've ever tested, and also possibly one of the best in some ways, but it's a very difficult laptop to recommend for a couple of reasons. And we'll get to that in a moment. But first of all, I mean, when you take a look at this, you might think, wow, this is sort of a monster machine. It's got a 13.3-inch display, but it's about an inch thick if you count the little rubber feet on the bottom. It weighs about 4.85 pounds. It feels like a throwback to older laptops in some ways, but there's some good reasons for that, because when you open this laptop, what you get is not a display, but two displays. And for that reason, we're actually going to zoom the camera out because I have a hard time fitting the whole thing in one view. So this is what the GPD Duo looks like when it's unlocked and set up for use. So let me go ahead and enter my PIN here and give you a little tour of this dual screen laptop. Now, GPD is a company that's probably best known for making handhelds, like handheld gaming PCs and mini laptops and purpose-built devices that are really meant to be held in your hands. This is something very, very different. This is also a purpose-built device that's unlike anything else that's on the market right now, but it is a much larger device, obviously. And the idea is basically this. What if we took a traditional laptop and instead of saying you can carry a second display as a portable monitor, we just built it right in? And so what we've got here is this upper screen is actually on a 360-degree hinge, and you can tilt it so it faces away, you can tilt it so it faces forward, you can enable it or disable it depending on whether you're using it with a little F3 action. So if we don't need it, we can just use this like a traditional laptop, and if we do need it, then we pull it up, turn it on, and get access to that second screen. Both of these are 2880 by 1800 pixel touchscreen displays, and they both also support pen input. So I've got here a pen that was not included, but it's a Microsoft Pen Protocol pen. So you can use touch and you can use the keyboard. Keyboard is a full-size backlit keyboard. The keys are not particularly bright, but it works in a dimly lit environment to give you a little bit of extra use there. And the hardware inside is pretty powerful. The model that I'm looking at here has an AMD Ryzen AI9 HX370 processor, which has 12 cores, 24 threads, and 16 RDNA 3.5 GPU compute units. Pretty powerful. And this device also has 64 gigs of RAM. It also has a really, pretty impressive set of ports, including a full capacity USB 4 port that you can use for power, video, data, USB Type-C port, full-size SD card reader, a headset jack, this little reset pin, which helps you reset the BIOS by sort of poking a pin in there, which is something that I've had to do on this device at least once, two full-size USB Type-A ports, a power button, and if we look at the back, where on modern laptops you often don't see much except for in sort of gaming machines, we've got an HDMI port, an Oculink port for external PCIe 4.0 connections, and a 2.5 gigabit Ethernet port. So this machine is honestly more laptop than a lot of people are ever going to need. And maybe it's for that reason that GPD hasn't sold a lot of them. So the company sent me this while it was available during crowdfunding. And at the time, they were trying to build buzz for it. I told them I've got a lot on my plate. It's going to take me a little while to get around to finishing the review. And now that my review is pretty much ready to go, it's largely been discontinued. You can still find this on some third-party retail sites, but it's a fairly expensive device that's going to cost you around $1,800 or more. And it's no longer being manufactured by GPD because they didn't manage to sell as many as they hoped they would in the first place. The company does say that they're going to continue supporting it, and they've already released a number of firmware BIOS UEFI updates that have improved performance of this device, but it's sort of a tricky thing to recommend because it is already discontinued as of the time that I'm publishing this video, and GPD is also a company that makes some really cool hardware, but is a relatively small Chinese brand that doesn't offers a lot of support for its devices outside of China. And so, for those reasons, is this something that somebody should spend $1,800 on? I don't know. But what I will say is that after having used it for a little while, I really hope that somebody else picks up the idea. Now, we have seen some other sort of dual screen laptops before where you have an upper screen and a lower screen, from the Asus ZenBook Duo to the Lenovo YogaBook 9i. But on those, you don't have the built-in keyboard. Instead, the idea is that you would take a keyboard, put it on top of the lower screen, and sort of make a laptop that looks sort of like that. Now, they're thinner, they're lighter, they're more portable in that sort of situation, but not having the built-in keyboard makes them feel more like tablets that you can also use a keyboard with. This really feels like a laptop that happens to have that second screen. Now, you may have noticed there's a kickstand that's built in here that sort of gives you a little bit of extra stability, but it's not 100% necessary most of the time. If I keep it at this angle, oops, sorry about the squeak there, keep it at this angle, and sort of just tilt the screen a little bit, it's not going to tip over. And more often than not, I'm using it at an angle closer to this, perfectly sturdy. So there is actually sort of an advantage to having this relatively heavy device down here. So it feels pretty sturdy, it feels pretty powerful, feels pretty fast. What are a couple of things that you might have concerns with? Performance, battery life, etc. Obviously, with two 2.8K OLED displays, battery life is not amazing, but it's not awful. The AMD Ryzen processor in here is a relatively efficient chip, and what I have found is that when doing a battery rundown test of playing two 1080p videos from YouTube, it got around 6.5 hours. In terms of real-world use, 3 to 5 hours, I'd say, depending on sort of what you're doing, which, given that this is a dual-screen device, is really not too bad at all. Again, here we've got 16 or a 12-core processor, 24 threads. We've got Radeon 890 graphics. Like I said, it's a pretty powerful device, and in terms of benchmarks, it really sort of lives up to the expectation of a device with those specifications. It's one of the fastest computers that I've tested. It does have dual fans on the inside, and you can hear them under heavy load. It's at times when I'm doing sort of more demanding things, it can get to the point where it's maybe just a little bit on the annoying side, but it is capable of doing quite a bit of multitasking. So I've used it, for instance, to edit audio documents or audio projects. Let's go ahead and skip that. Using Reaper, which is a digital audio editing workstation here. I've used it to, have dozens of browser tabs open while I do work on Liliputing.com, which is the website I run, obviously. And just, plenty of multitasking capabilities. So let's open up a few more applications here just to sort of show you what the beauty of having multiple displays on the go can be. So, for instance, if I wanted to edit in a document on the top screen while working on spreadsheets on the bottom screen, if I wanted to hop on a Zoom call and make sure that I could review, watch my notes while I'm on that call, having multiple displays really sort of gives you the ability to do all of these things at the same time. So the display, or the camera here, is a 5 megapixel camera. It's a little bit higher quality than you get on a lot of entry-level devices, and it looks pretty good there. But now I can sort of be working on other stuff on one screen while I'm chatting on video on this screen. So it gives you sort of all sorts of multitasking capabilities. I'm somebody who writes about little computers. Obviously, Liliputing is all about small computing devices, little portable machines, smartphones, tablets, mini PCs, and so forth. But when I'm working from home, I've kind of gotten used to the idea of having multiple displays or widescreen monitor, and this is sort of a no-compromise device that gives you the same abilities on the go. Now, it did take me a little while to get used to the idea of looking up instead of looking to the side, but once I did, I found that this is actually a really, nice way to experience multiple displays, because as I'm looking upwards towards this window, I don't have to move my neck. I don't have to go from side to side. I can just sort of glance up, glance down. give you a visual of what that looks like. Now I'm looking at the lower display. Now I'm looking at the upper display. And, it's just a little eye motion. Another thing is ergonomically, laptops often have people looking downwards in a way that is not great for your neck and your shoulders. Looking up at a screen that's sort of maybe at that height, that angle, closer to your eye level, is actually a pretty healthy way to go. So again, I think it's the sort of laptop that when I first opened this thing up, I literally laughed at how ridiculous it is. But within a minute of using it, I wished that there were more laptops that would be like this. It is not a perfect experience. There are definitely some quirks that you might want to be aware of. For one thing, when I tried running Ubuntu on this, the dual displays were detected in sort of weird ways. It works reasonably okay if you don't mess with the default settings of having a sort of extended display where one screen, it thinks they're next to each other instead of on top of each other. But if I adjust it so that they're on top of each other, and then I turn off this display in Ubuntu, when I turn it back on, the whole computer crashes. If I try mirroring the displays, then the top touchscreen stops working and the bottom one winds up being inaccurate. So the out-of-the-box experience with Ubuntu Linux is a little bit problematic. It's possible that there could be some sort of driver updates or software settings that might be able to address those, but it's just something to proceed with caution on. Another thing is, as I mentioned, there's a BIOS reset button on the side of this computer that I have had to use. The reason I use that is because there came a day when the computer just would not start up. And I'm not entirely sure why that is, but the only way that I could get it to start up properly was by pressing a pin in that sort of BIOS area. Another thing is, as I mentioned, both screens should support touch, but there's a bug that sometimes causes touch to no longer work on the top display, and the only way to get it to work again is to turn the screen off, turn the screen back on again. So, there's some bugs that, again, make this sort of a tricky thing to recommend because, again, I don't know what level of support, long-term support, is going to continue to be offered for this device from GPD, but it's kind of ridiculously cool to have multiple displays. If you're looking for something that's super lightweight, this is not it. If you're looking for something that's super thin, this is not it. Like I said, it's about an inch thick and about 4.85 pounds, but it's much, much more convenient than carrying a separate display. But you can also use it as a separate display. So when I gave you the tour of the ports there, what I didn't point out is that there's also a USB Type-C port up here on the upper display and separate separate screen brightness controls. Now, the screen brightness controls are necessary because if you adjust the brightness on the lower screen, it has no impact on the upper display. So this is basically, it's a portable monitor that just happens to be permanently attached. But you can also use it as just a portable monitor. So I'm going to plug in here this HP Spectre laptop. And you'll notice that right away, well, almost right away, it mirrors the display or acts as an extended desktop for my HP laptop. So now the lower screen here becomes the only usable screen for this laptop, and I can extend the desktop of my HP laptop instead. So that works whether the device is powered on or powered off. In fact, let's go ahead and turn off the computer. If we wanted to sort of use it in a power saving mode, let's see, I think it should automatically detect that. There we go. I don't usually do that when it's turned on in that way. And so we could sort of flip this around, use the entire base as if it were a kickstand, and now we've got just a portable, kind of big, heavy monitor. You're probably not going to have a lot of situations where you want to carry around a 4.85 pound portable display, but if you have a different device that you want to connect, you can do that in this way. You could also plug in a phone or a tablet or anything else that supports video output over USB-C. So it's kind of a nice little bonus feature that you have there. In fact, you can plug video out from one USB-C port on this computer to the upper display. There's just no reason that you would ever really want to do that because you're replicating what's already built-in functionality. You get no advantages to using a cable for what's already available. You can also sort of fold the screen down here and use it like a tablet, but it's not a great tablet because not only is it a big, thick, heavy device, but there's no palm rejection. Automatic screen rotation doesn't work as well as I would like it to. It doesn't seem to really support portrait mode on the upper display, and it doesn't turn off the lower display when you're holding it like this. So while you might think, hey, it's a convertible that you can use as a notebook or a tablet, it's really more of a dual screen device that can also be used as a single screen device, or you can mirror a display or an extended display so that the person sitting across from you can also see it. But it's not really designed for use as a tablet. So it's a little bit strange to me that they included pen support at all. I suppose it's nice that they did, but it's not necessarily a crucial feature. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back on and just show you a couple of the more advanced settings here by jumping into the UEFI BIOS area. So from here, you can see that you have access to a lot of different settings. So ACPI settings, CPU configuration, enabling and disabling different functions, USB settings, PCI settings, the NVMe storage, and so on. There's even overclocking settings and some information about the 2.5 gigabits Ethernet controller. Chipset, security, you can enable or disable secure boot, and you can choose your boot options. So I just hit escape during startup in order to get into this menu. You can also adjust the functions of the F keys, the function keys. So by default on the latest BIOSes, you have to press function to control screen brightness, display off, media buttons, volume, etc. But you can flip that so that you'd press function to do F1, F2, F3, F4, and by default, it would just do those controls. We're going to go ahead and just restart. You can also hit the F7 key during startup to boot from a USB flash device or any sort of alternative things that are plugged in. So that's how I was able to run Ubuntu, which I'm not going to cover in this video because it sort of takes a while to get into that, but you can find a little bit more information about my experiences with Ubuntu at liliputing.com. But overall, I just wanted to take this moment to show you sort of the startup experience. So it's relatively quick, relatively easy. Well, I say relatively quick, but of course these things always take a moment. And there you have it. So again, this is the GPD Duo. It's a dual screen laptop, and it's totally got me sold on the idea of dual screen laptops. I wish that we would see more companies put things like this out. I wish that we would see cheaper options and maybe fancier options, maybe versions with discrete graphics, maybe versions with lower power processors or less impressive displays, because it would really be nice to have this idea of an always available second screen that's there when you want it. You can hide it when you don't need it, but you'll also have that sort of built-in keyboard that is always available as well. So whether or not you're interested in picking up a GPD Duo and you think that that's something that you can afford to spend money on, knowing that it may have limited support in the long run, I think that this idea of having laptops with this sort of design is a pretty interesting one. And it has me a little bit more interested in the thinner, the lighter, the ZenBook Duo and the YogaBook 9i type devices. But again, I'm really sold on the idea of having the permanently attached keyboard if it's a device that you're going to use primarily as a laptop and secondarily as a tablet. Those devices really feel that they're much more tablet first. I guess one thing I didn't show you here is a little bit of video playback. So that'll, to the extent possible, to demonstrate on this device. You can hear the speakers a little bit. So let's go ahead and...
How much money do you spend per month living in New York City, including everything?
8K the last 2 months.
And what's your occupation? What do you do?
I do.
Hi, this is Brad Linder with Liliputing, and this is the Asus ROG Flow Z13, which is a 13.4-inch gaming tablet, or maybe it's a 2-in-1 laptop, depending on whether you want to consider a detachable keyboard, something that makes it a laptop. But either way, this is the first time that ASUS has updated the ROG. So again, just like I don't need to name all the possibilities of what you can do with multiple displays, but we could keep that running in the background indefinitely. You could monitor a video, a Zoom call, anything else. You could play a game, you could write a document, you could do some web surfing. You can use the bottom screen for all sorts of other activities while it's playing in the upper display. Speakers are pretty good, I would say. Let's go ahead and unmute that. I will say, though, also that like most laptop speakers, they get reasonably loud, but the quality kind of diminishes the louder they get because you'll notice the lack of bass, among other things. It's an optional feature, or at least the light is. Turn the lights on or off if you don't want to see them. You can also, of course, change the color if you want something that's a little bit simpler. But overall, the idea is to bring something. So sort of lacking bass, and maybe it gets a little bit distorted at higher volumes. But overall, you know, if you don't feel like plugging things in, you do have relatively decent speakers built in. I took this laptop with me when I was traveling, and I spent, you know, sort of a week using accessories like a USB microphone, plugged in some headphones, a USB audio interface, mouse, trackball, you know, anything that you want to plug into it. You've got plenty of ports to do those things. You have that high-speed Ethernet cable as well. So it's a great portable workstation that gives you a lot of the experience that you might, up until now, only have had if you were sitting down at a desktop. So, yeah. All right. I'm starting to repeat myself, so I'm going to go ahead and stop this video, but I just wanted to give you a look at the GPD Duo, which is a dual-screen laptop, which really demonstrates the possibilities of this form factor, even though this particular device is expensive, it's big, it's heavy, and it's already been discontinued, so it's going to be sort of a limited edition device moving forward. I'd like to thank GPD for sending me this demo unit for testing purposes that was sent free of charge. GPD had no input on the contents of this review, and you can find more details about the whole thing at liliputing.com. So this is Brad Linder with Liliputing and the GPD Duo.